Imagine walking into a room where the richest, most powerful people in a nation are quietly deciding the fate of millions. And then imagine that 7 weeks later, the world as you know it begins to unravel. This is not a movie. It is the year 1929, a city of glass and marble, a culture drunk on credit and confidence, and a handful of decisions that ripple outward into catastrophe. This story is not only about numbers on a ticker tape. It's about people who act with conviction, hubris, fear, and sometimes compassion. It's about Thomas Lamont arranging deals on an ocean liner, about Charles Mitchell, the man known as Sunshine Charlie, trying to keep his bank alive, about traders, reporters, and a nation that believed prosperity would last forever. By the end of today's video, you'll understand how a boom became a bust, and why the choices of a few changed the lives of millions. Andrew Ross Sorkin's 1929 is a granular, character-driven chronicle of the events that led up to the stock market crash and its aftermath. Sorkin walks us through the decisions, personalities, and structural forces that made the crash possible, and he does it by following actors often overlooked by sweeping economic histories: bankers, brokerage partners, politicians, and the reporters who watched them. We'll follow the book's timeline from early 1929 through the crash months and into the early 1930s. The meetings, the mergers, the hubris, and the shock. Let's begin. Prologue, The Pressure Builds. The book opens with an image of Charles Mitchell in October 1929, exhausted after a brutal market decline. He returns to his large bank, National City, and discovers that his own house had been quietly buying its stock to support takeover. The purchases are far greater than they can afford. Mitchell understands immediately the danger. If the truth leaks, confidence could evaporate and a bank run could follow. Sorkin uses this moment to show how the fragile scaffolding of confidence held the financial system together. The prologue frames the moral of the story. Crises are as much social and psychological as they are technical. Part 1. The year unfolds. The year 1929 began not with panic, but with pride. The American dream appeared unstoppable. Skyscrapers reached toward the clouds. Automobiles filled city streets, and newspapers hailed a new era of prosperity. Wall Street had become the epicenter of ambition, and every clerk, banker, and industrialist seemed to believe that the stock market could only go one way: up. The first part of Andrew Ross Sorkin's 1929 meticulously reconstructs that fateful year, month by month, capturing the dizzying optimism and subtle tremors of fear beneath it. Each chapter introduces the players, their motives, and the chain reactions of decisions that would later ignite the greatest financial collapse in modern history. Chapter 1, February 1st, 1929, The Calm Before the Storm. Thomas Lamont, the dignified partner of J.P. Morgan & Company, boards the RMS Aquitania bound for Europe. On paper, his mission is diplomatic, smoothing over international financial tensions and managing reparations between nations. But Lamont represents more than his firm. He symbolizes the confidence of Wall Street itself. In a world drunk on prosperity, his words carry the weight of prophecy. As Lamont gazes over the Atlantic, Sorkin paints him as both a pragmatist and an optimist. The market is soaring, and Morgan's influence extends from Manhattan to London. Lamont sees no reason to doubt the system. The trusts are flourishing, credit is abundant, and America's faith in capitalism borders on religious devotion. The scene sets the tone, the illusion of stability masking the storm ahead. Chapter 2, February 14th, 1929, Sunshine Charlie and the Federal Reserve. Charles E. Mitchell, known as Sunshine Charlie, exudes charisma. As president of National City Bank, he is America's banking celebrity, confident, magnetic, and fiercely ambitious. On this February morning, he visits the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, his polished shoes echoing across the marble floors. Inside, Mitchell debates with Fed officials over credit policy. The Federal Reserve, worried about rampant speculation, considers tightening margin loans. Mitchell argues the opposite, that credit fuels growth and optimism, and restraint would stifle prosperity. His smile masks urgency. His own bank's fortunes depend on easy money. Sorkin illustrates the informal power web that connects bankers and policymakers. The Fed, supposedly independent, bends to social gravity. Few dare challenge Mitchell's charm and reputation. The meeting encapsulates the psychology of the age. Everyone knows excess is building, yet no one wants to be the first to call it out. Chapter 3, February 16th, 1929, The Machinery of Euphoria. Investment trusts sweep the nation. Advertised as modern miracles, they promise ordinary investors access to elite management and diverse holdings. In truth, they are pyramids built on leverage. Each new trust owns shares in others, multiplying both opportunity and danger. Sorkin vividly describes how risk became repackaged as sophistication. Brokers courted clients over champagne lunches. Journalists praised the new financial order, and housewives mailed in savings to buy a piece of Wall Street glory. The speculative fever was democratic, no longer confined to bankers, but spreading into living rooms and lunch counters. Chapter 4, March 4th, 1929, The Chorus of Prosperity. Newspapers report record profits and breathtaking mergers. The Dow climbs higher. The country seems unstoppable. Beneath the surface, however, Sorkin hints at strain. The same optimism that fuels expansion also blinds the participants. Lamont and Mitchell chase prestige deals, each wanting to prove his institution's dominance. The story here is one of pride and competition. Morgan men believe in dignity and restraint. Mitchell believes in access and mass appeal. Their contrasting philosophies, the quiet patrician versus the populist showman, create a subtle tension that mirrors the market itself. Chapter 5, March 5th, 1929, Behind Closed Doors. In smoky private rooms, bankers form syndicates and strike handshake deals worth millions. Reputation replaces regulation. Lamont's careful caution is increasingly rare. Mitchell's speed and bravado dominate. Sorkin's prose captures the heat of these negotiations, where alliances shift with the tide of profit. Everyone is making money, but few ask how. Paper wealth becomes the phrase of the decade, an illusion built on credit and trust. The chapter ends with an image of Mitchell staring out his office window, confident that National City's ascent will never end. Chapter 6, March 26th, 1929, The Empire of Leverage. The Allegheny Corporation, a powerful investment trust, takes center stage. Promoters advertise it as a model of stability, backed by America's finest names. Yet Sorkin reveals the precarious scaffolding underneath. Each layer of borrowed money amplifies both profit and peril. Investors pour in cash, convinced by glossy brochures and glowing news coverage. A few insiders quietly express concern, but are drowned out by enthusiasm. The market is a mirror reflecting only optimism. Chapter 7, March 29th, 1929, Champagne and Credit. Sorkin zooms in on New York's social whirl. Dinner parties where financiers toast record highs, telegrams where deals are struck before dessert, and the illusion of endless momentum. Money, manners, and ambition blur together. Success is celebrated as virtue itself. But behind a laughter and toasts, debt expands invisibly. Brokers extend margin loans at unprecedented levels. Sorkin notes that speculation has become a social ritual, a game where everyone believes they can step away before the music stops. Chapter 8, April 5th, 1929, The Illusion of Data. Economic reports flood the press. Rising productivity, industrial expansion, and surging consumption. Economists reassure the public that America has entered a permanent plateau of prosperity. Sorkin captures the irony. Data that appears comforting but conceals the fact that much of the growth is built on borrowed money. Investors read headlines as gospel. Banks cite statistics to justify continued lending. Confidence becomes circular. The more people believe, the more true it feels. Chapter 9, April 8th, 1929, The Mania Expands. The trust mania reaches fever pitch. Promoters create new vehicles faster than investors can read their prospectuses. Names like Goldman Sachs Trading Corporation attract ordinary citizens who see Wall Street not as a gamble, but as a ticket to the middle class. Sorkin presents heartbreaking vignettes. A teacher cashing in savings bonds. A clerk mortgaging his home, all to get in before it's too late. The seduction of success is universal. Chapter 10, April 12, 1929, Margin on the Edge. Margin loans, borrowing to buy stocks, become the silent engine of excess. Brokers allow clients to borrow up to 90% of stock's price. As long as prices rise, fortunes multiply. If they fall, ruin is instantaneous. Sorkin dissects the mechanical elegance and cruelty of this system. Ordinary Americans, once savers, now live on credit. The culture of caution gives way to the cult of opportunity. Mitchell's National City Bank expands consumer credit aggressively, unknowingly laying the fuse that will later ignite. Chapter 11, April 14, 1929, Whispers in Washington. Some lawmakers grow uneasy. Rumors of speculative excess reach Capitol Hill, but political will remains weak. President Hoover and his advisors, buoyed by good statistics, see no reason to intervene. The system seems self-correcting until it isn't. Sorkin's lens captures the complacency of power. The whispers are drowned out by the roar of optimism. Chapter 12, May 7th, 1929, The Age of Celebrities. Bankers and financiers achieve celebrity status. Charles Mitchell's face appears in magazines. Lamont's name commands respect on both sides of the Atlantic. Investors equate fame with safety. If the great men are still buying, how could anything be wrong? Sorkin uses this chapter to highlight the mythology of leadership, how public faith in personalities can become a substitute for analysis. Chapter 13, June 4th, 1929, The High Tide. By summer, the market seems bulletproof. The Dow hits record highs. Newspapers hail a new golden age. Yet in private, some insiders quietly sell. Sorkin shows the duality, public optimism masking private caution. The smart money senses fragility but cannot stop the herd. Chapter 14, June 29th, 1929, When Growth Becomes Greed. Corporations chase expansion for its own sake. Mergers multiply, financed by borrowed funds. Executives measure success by stock price alone. Sorkin portrays a nation addicted to applause, unable to imagine decline. Chapter 15, September 2nd, 1929, The Late Summer Heat. Autumn approaches. The market still soars, but nerves tighten. Credit is stretched thin. Brokers' loans reach all-time highs. Political debates over regulation continue, but talk moves slower than speculation. The chapter's tone darkens, a storm gathering on the horizon, invisible to those too dazzled by sunlight. Chapter 16, October 2nd, 1929, The Cracks Appear. Small sell-offs ripple through the market. Journalists call it a healthy correction. In truth, the system trembles. Margin calls multiply. For the first time, fear appears, quickly rationalized away. Sorkin makes us feel the tension of that early October week. Quiet panic beneath the facade of control. Chapter 17, October 6th, 1929, The Human Element. Traders on the floor of the exchange move faster, voices sharper. Rumors fly. A failed deal, a bad earnings report. The crowd's energy changes. Fear, once hidden, becomes contagious. Sorkin reminds us that markets are human emotions given numerical form. Chapter 18, October 10th, 1929, Warnings Ignored. Advisors caution restraint. Editors publish reassurances. Leaders repeat the mantra. The fundamentals are sound. Behind the scenes, banks quietly prepare cash reserves. The facade of confidence remains, but cracks widen. Chapter 19, October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. Then comes the day the world tilts. Selling begins at the opening bell. Within minutes, prices collapse. The ticker runs hours behind. Crowds gather outside the New York Stock Exchange, silent except for the clatter of the tape. The market becomes chaos. Sorkin's narration is cinematic. Mitchell, Lamont, and other leaders rush into emergency meetings, pledging to buy shares to calm the panic. For a brief moment, it works, but only briefly. Chapter 20, October 27th, 1929, The Aftershock. Panic returns with greater force. Calls pour into brokers. Telephones buzz nonstop. Some investors lose everything. Sorkin humanizes the statistics. Clerks, retirees, small families whose savings vanish in a day. The elite realize they cannot stop the tide. The psychological dam has broken. Chapter 21, November 6th, 1929, Political Theater. Washington scrambles to respond. Committees form, speeches are made, but no real relief emerges. Sorkin depicts the widening gap between rhetoric and reality, a government still in denial as Wall Street burns. Chapter 22, November 8th, 1929, The Blame Game. Public outrage grows. Newspapers print names of prominent bankers. Congress whispers about investigations. Mitchell's once sunny reputation dims. Confidence, once limitless, curdles into suspicion. Chapter 23, November 13th, 1929, Picking up the pieces. The market stabilizes, though at devastating lows. Bankers assess losses. Investors retreat into silence. Sorkin explores the emotional aftermath, shame, denial, and disbelief. The myth of endless growth is dead, but few can admit it. Chapter 24, December 19th, 1929, The Unraveling. Companies collapse under debt. Credit tightens. Small banks fail. America begins to understand that this was not a brief correction, but a structural calamity. Sorkin details the first layoffs, the first bankruptcies, and the quiet dread spreading across towns. Chapter 25, December 21st, 1929. The year ends in shadows. By Christmas, Wall Street is unrecognizable. The lavish parties have ended. Brokers whisper instead of boast. Lamont and Mitchell, once titans, face uncertainty. The year closes with a nation stunned, not yet in depression, but staring directly into its depths. Sorkin ends part one with a haunting sense of inevitability. The dream has cracked, and the next chapter of history will be written in hardship and reform. Part two, The Aftershocks. The new decade dawned not with celebration, but with silence. The echoes of 1929's crash reverberated across America and the world. Confidence, once abundant, was now the rarest currency. Andrew Ross Sorkin's 1929 shifts its lens from the feverish trading floors of Wall Street to the bleak landscapes of small-town banks, empty factories, and the marbled halls of power in Washington. The crash was over, but the consequences had only begun. The story of 1930 to 1933 is one of unraveling illusions, of men who clung to faith in the market, of political leaders struggling to understand the scope of the collapse, and of a public slowly realizing that the world they knew had vanished. Chapter 26, September 30th, 1930, a year later. 1 year after the crash, America is a changed nation. The optimism that once filled newspaper headlines has turned into quiet dread. Factories run below capacity. Unemployment climbs steadily, and brokers' offices that once overflowed with chatter now sit half empty. Thomas Lamont, still at J.P. Morgan, feels the shift acutely. His correspondence shows a man trapped between two worlds, the old order of private finance and the new reality of public desperation. The Morgan partners meet often, trying to coordinate stability through loans and moral suasion, but the mechanisms that once worked now falter. The problem is no longer confidence, it is solvency. Sorkin paints a picture of a nation suspended in disbelief. People still talk of recovery, but the numbers tell another story. The stock market, now a shadow of its former self, serves as a daily reminder that faith in perpetual prosperity was an illusion. Chapter 27, October 28, 1930, Political Pressure Mounts. The crash, once seen as a Wall Street affair, becomes a political crisis. Senators and congressmen begin demanding answers. The Federal Reserve faces criticism for allowing speculation to spiral out of control, while banks defend their practices as mere misfortune. Hoover's administration preaches patience and voluntary cooperation, but hunger and layoffs make patience impossible. Sorkin dramatizes the growing tension between Main Street and Washington. Breadlines form in major cities. Farmers, crushed by debt, destroy crops they can't afford to ship. The disconnect between economic data and human suffering becomes glaring. A once proud nation is beginning to feel the first chill of a global depression. Chapter 28, November 5, 1930. The Inquisition begins. Enter the investigators. Men like Ferdinand Pecora, whose dogged pursuit of truth will later make him a household name. Sorkin introduces Pecora and his peers as moral crusaders, determined to expose how the crash happened and who benefited. Their early inquiries uncover conflicts of interest, self-dealing, and opaque structures that allowed executives to profit even as their companies crumbled. In packed hearing rooms, the public listens with outrage as details emerge. Executives selling stock while advising others to buy, banks underwriting risky trusts they themselves barely understood. The myth of integrity at the top of Wall Street begins to collapse. Chapter 29, February 2nd, 1931, The Long Winter. By early 1931, the economy sinks further. Factories close, construction halts, and unemployment exceeds 8 million. Sorkin juxtaposes the sterile figures of economic reports with human suffering. Families doubling up in apartments, children queuing for soup, men waiting at railroad yards for work that never comes. Thomas Lamont meets with international bankers to stabilize currencies, but optimism is gone. The same men who once toasted prosperity now whisper of deflation and systemic failure. The invisible web of global finance tightens around the U.S., turning an American crash into a worldwide depression. Chapter 30, February 18th, 1932, The Politics of Desperation. Congress debates intervention. Should the government inject funds, or should the free market heal itself? The old guard clings to laissez-faire ideals, but populist voices grow louder. Public anger swells against bankers who are seen as untouched by the suffering of ordinary citizens. Sorkin captures the birth of a new political mood, the idea that government must act. For the first time, massive public works and relief programs are discussed not as charity, but as necessity. Yet Hoover's caution delays action. The depression deepens, and with each month of inaction, the credibility of the old system erodes. Chapter 31, November 8th, 1932, Roosevelt's Rise. The presidential election of 1932 becomes a referendum on fear itself. Franklin D. Roosevelt's message of bold, persistent experimentation resonates across a desperate nation. Hoover's measured speeches sound like echoes of another era. Sorkin follows the election night as radio broadcasts carry the results across America. For millions, Roosevelt's victory feels like a lifeline, a promise that the government will no longer stand idle. Yet beneath the celebration lies anxiety. Can any leader truly fix an economy this broken? Chapter 32, February 18th, 1933, The Breaking Point. The banking crisis reaches its climax. Depositors, terrified by rumors, rush to withdraw their savings. Lines stretch around city blocks. Banks, lacking liquidity, shutter their doors. The financial heart of America stops beating. Sorkin immerses the reader in the chaos. Telegrams flying between New York and Washington, governors declaring bank holidays, and panicked citizens hiding cash under mattresses. The system that once promised endless opportunity now devours itself. Confidence, once intangible, has become a matter of physical survival. Chapter 33 and 34, February 21st to 22nd, 1933, Panic peaks. In these consecutive days, the panic spreads nationwide. rural banks fall first, followed by urban giants. Lamont and the Morgan partners try to orchestrate rescues, but their influence is diminished. Government officials debate emergency powers while newspapers print photos of boarded-up bank doors. Sorkin emphasizes the human toll, businesses failing overnight, families unable to access their savings, and the pervasive fear that the entire system might never recover. The illusion of control, so carefully maintained in 1929, has vanished completely. Chapter 35, March 3, 1933. The last night of Hoover. On the eve of Roosevelt's inauguration, Washington is a city of tension. Banks are collapsing by the hour. Hoover refuses to act without congressional authorization, fearful of overreach. Roosevelt, not yet in office, declines to share responsibility until sworn in. The transition becomes a parable of paralysis. Sorkin shows both men as prisoners of principle. Hoover by caution, Roosevelt by strategy. As night falls, America teeters on the brink of total financial collapse. Chapter 36, March 7, 1933. The bank holiday. Roosevelt's first major act as president is bold and immediate, a nationwide bank holiday. All banks are temporarily closed. It's a gamble, shutting down the system to save it. Sorkin portrays the drama vividly. Citizens waking to headlines declaring the closure, traders suspended in disbelief, and foreign observers watching for signs of civil unrest. Behind the scenes, Roosevelt's team drafts emergency legislation to restore order. Confidence, not capital, is their first goal. The country holds its breath. Chapter 37, March 21, 1933. Rebuilding trust. As banks slowly reopen, Roosevelt addresses the nation via radio. His calm, reassuring voice reaches millions. He explains the crisis in plain language and urges faith. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," he declares. The line becomes immortal. Sorkin presents this as the turning point, not an economic miracle, but a psychological one. The people, exhausted by uncertainty, choose to believe again. Money returns to banks. The spiral finally halts. Chapters 38 to 40. May 16th to 23rd, 1933. Reform and Reckoning. Congress moves swiftly, propelled by Roosevelt's momentum. Hearings expose the excesses of the 1920s. Insider trading, self-dealing, and deceptive corporate practices. The Pecora Commission's findings fuel public outrage, leading to landmark legislation. Sorkin walks us through the debates that give birth to the Glass-Steagall Act, the separation of commercial and investment banking, and the creation of the FDIC, ensuring deposits for ordinary Americans. The culture of unchecked speculation is over. In its place rises a new era of oversight and accountability. Chapters 41 to 42, June 16th to 21st, 1933. The New Order. By mid-1933, America stands transformed. The banking system has been remade, the stock market reined in, and the relationship between government and finance permanently altered. Lamont retreats into quieter influence. Mitchell, once the golden boy of banking, faces disgrace and investigation. Sorkin closes this act with solemn reflection. The men who built the bubble have been humbled. The lesson of 1929 is not merely financial, it is moral. Unchecked confidence, left alone, breeds collapse. But renewal, born of humility and reform, can rebuild even a shattered world. Epilogue and Afterword. Lessons and Legacy. Sorkin closes by reflecting on what 1929 means for us today. How leverage, weak incentives, unchecked optimism, and the concentration of reputation can create systemic risk. He reminds us that crises are rooted not only in bad models or mathematics, but in human judgment and institutions that misalign private incentives with public stability. So what should we remember from 1929? 3 key takeaways. Confidence is fragile. Financial systems are social systems built on trust. Once trust cracks, the machinery grinds to a halt. Leverage amplifies everything. Investment trusts, margin loans, and hidden chains of obligations transformed modest losses into catastrophic contagion. People matter. The crash was not an inevitable force of nature. It was the outcome of decisions made by named individuals: Lamont, Mitchell, regulators, journalists, and speculators. Sorkin's narrative is a powerful reminder that history is not distant. It's alive in our institutions, in the incentives we set, and in the stories we tell to justify risk. If you enjoyed this breakdown of 1929 by Andrew Ross Sorkin, like the video and subscribe for more book summaries. Thank you for watching. And remember, history gets you wiser only if you pay attention to the people who made it.